etc. But The Lancet, one of the preeminent medical journals in the world, has since about 2008 had a whole climate change commission and published a lot about the health impacts of climate change. And finally, that's got through to IPCC meetings. It was missing before that, the health aspects, but it's been in the last 3-4 years, it's been included in considerations of the costs and the impacts, which is great because there certainly are a lot, and I'll go through some of those. So there's no doubt by any of the scientific organisations or really medical organisations that global warming, global heating is happening, and it's beyond reasonable doubt, which is far and above what we would even need to call on the precautionary principle. It's stronger evidence for it than most medical interventions or risk factors that we treat. And you know all this already, but sometimes we just need to remind people, and I do at the beginning of my talks, that in the scientific world, there's no doubt, not at the level of certainty that we're acting in medicine or science. The only doubt is the political problem. And we've wasted so much time, particularly in Australia and America, with that polarisation. In fact, Reagan and Thatcher were planning to take action, and then lobbyists for the oil companies got in their ear. But after hearing James Hansen and others give them the evidence 30 years ago, so we've wasted an awful lot of time. And I think it's salient to compare this to our response to tobacco, to big coal and oil, like big tobacco. And we're still fighting big tobacco to this day. I guess some of you will have heard that just a few days ago, the Australian government finally just won, and the case was dismissed in the international courts for under the trade disputes. Some other countries that grow tobacco taking Australia to the international court to try and get reparations for our plain packaging laws. But it stood up for health reasons. So we were allowed for public health to override the interests of business profits. And this is what's happening with the big fossil fuels. And in fact, they've actually used the same PR companies and the same tricks, and some of even the same scientists, to obfuscate, to create doubt, to slow down action. And it's been very successful. Just like big tobacco said there's no proof that cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. And that was on a technicality because there's no randomized controlled trial, because it's not ethical to do one once that was certain that from cohort studies that it increased your risk 10 times if you're a moderate smoker. There's no way we could do it. And we can't do a randomized controlled trial in the world. So people really with any grasp of science can argue against the obfuscation and the twisting and the cherry picking, but it does require a little bit. And I think that's, as doctors, we're quite well placed. Especially, I'm glad that I've done a lot of epidemiology and understand evidence and types of scientific studies and evidence that I can pick holes in people's poor arguments. But the marketing spin, the billions that have gone into slowing action has really been what's held us back, particularly in Australia, because not only are we addicted to, well, it was cheap when we don't pay the externalities, the health costs, but also because of conflict of interest, self-interest. We're conflicted by making profits out of digging stuff out of the ground for next to nothing, particularly when those companies don't pay for the health costs. So DA, one of the poster series we produced, tried to make this link with cigarette smoking. See that coal as a health hazard. I put that on there because I was inspired by the smoking as a health hazard to make that link of the same tactics used by big oil and big tobacco and big coal. And that's one way to look at explaining to people the merchants of doubt and the merchants of greed and profit. And as all you know, we don't have time to delay. It's going to be much harder, and there's some doubts that we'll be able to stay under 2 degrees at the moment. And so it's desperate and urgent. We can't delay and wait. We really do have to act. And I think talking to people about the carbon budget is very important. A lot of the public that I come across don't understand the concept of a carbon budget, and I'm sure that that's part of your messaging. But I would suggest looking at the health aspects, adding that into your messaging. Even the AMA, the American Medical Association, the British Medical Association, a lot of the colleges in the last year or two, DEA and other groups have encouraged them to come out and state that there's a health emergency beyond that climate change is real and happening. And so a lot of colleges last year, particularly during the bushfire smokes, came and actually supported us, saying that climate change is a health emergency. And we know that it's going to put a lot of lives at risk, more possibly than COVID, but it's a slow burn problem rather than immediate burn. There are multiple impacts on health, and I'll touch on a few of them just to give you some ammunition, as it were, or some information. It's probably worthwhile looking them up and being familiar with some of these, because it's more than just severe weather events that people think about. We'll look a little bit at extreme heat and air pollution in the next few slides, and increasing allergies, increasing pollen counts, increasing food poisoning, food insecurity, migration, spread of dengue with warmer and malaria with warmer temperatures. This is another poster that I was involved in creating about 13 years ago for DA. So it's getting a little bit dated now, and you'll notice that a lot of it's about individual action, and I'll touch on individual versus system change at the end of my presentation. Again, there's no doubt that we've experienced hotter and hotter years consecutively, and that's the dryness and the heat has led to the bushfires, and that has health impacts, not only economic impacts, but mental health. Studies done of the Victorian bushfires showed 10 years later people had poorer mental health. The Black Saturday fires, when all the people that were died and the loss for them. So the PTSD and depression is certainly a health problem. What's interesting though is that we focus on the lives lost in bushfires, but there's health costs. This shows that in the fires in Victoria in January, February, the ambulance service had 25% increase in call-outs and 46% increase on the average over the 3 hottest days. And emergency department presentations were up 12%. And they actually had 374 excess deaths over those few weeks, twice as many as the number lost in the bushfires itself, mostly in the elderly, dying from cardiac disease and heat strokes and things like that. Extreme heat days are going to impact on our economics as well as our comfort and cause a lot of deaths. We've already had a number of young people in the last decade die when they've been out exercising in summer and had heat stroke and died. Young soldiers and motorcyclists out having fun and then ending up collapsing and dying. It's not just elderly people. Air pollution is part of the story too, because it's very much linked. The fossil fuels are dirty, alternatives are clean. And making that link, and people are interested in clean air, especially at the moment when the air cleaned up. People valued it, and that was a big push in China to reduce coal consumption, the air. The Chinese wanted to come to clean places like Australia to live because the air was affecting their children's ability to play outside, but it kills people as well. 3,000 deaths is more than what car crashes cause each year. And because it is linked to coal power stations, it's the greatest cause, and vehicle traffic, and we can move to EVs, also decreasing fossil fuels, then we'll have a win-win situation. Just quickly touch on floods. 11-12 flood in Brisbane, 211. Lots of cancellations of elective surgery. GP practices during the floods affected, so it has big health impacts as well. In addition to talking about the risks, I think it's worthwhile putting a positive spin. What are the benefits of cleaner transport, of cleaner air, of cleaner energy? Because that's what people want. They don't want to lose things. The story is often, how many jobs will we lose if we shut down coal? what about how much better health we can have if we have active transport, if we have cleaner air? And that's why I think our stories are important, how we frame things. There's lots of what we call co-benefits. That if we act on climate, not only do we actually prevent climate change, but we can have healthier and happier cities, because that'll be part of the solution. What's good for the environment might be good for the community and good for individuals as well. So greatest threat or greatest opportunity. You can read these later. I'm happy to allow people access to these slides. In fact, these come from the IPPC infographics, so they're free to share, and so they're good even just to take with you or give to people, or you know, put up on your social media, etc. Just to show the benefits of action. It's not about hair, shirt, and missing out on stuff. Do we want a cleaner, happier, healthy life, or do we want to race around currently as we're living now? Obesity is a growing problem, sorry for the pun, and a lot of diabetes and heart disease that relates from that. So active transport, some of our dependence on fossil fuels, if we remove that, would actually help us to not put on as many kilos over our lifetime, and we'd be healthier for it. So I talked before about personal action in that poster from 13 years ago. But we know that if half of us reduce our carbon footprints, the other half will just expand theirs to fill the gap, and emissions keep going up and we blow out a carbon budget. So we've got to do more than that, and that's what your group does. You ask for a fair price on carbon and all the other things that go along with that, the reliance on coal. We need to look for alternatives. But as well as that, of course, the carbon sinks, things to soak up the carbon. And how we eat and travel, reducing your meat consumption, and eating locally is only part of it. It's shifting to a more plant-based diet, and of course city planning is very important in the circular economy. And I think it is good to see it in a part of a bigger system, but just concentrate, if you are specialised in one area, just on one particular part. We have people in DA who just do air pollution or just do biodiversity. And that's good that we've got those experts, but we also try and tell the big story as well. So I'm nearly done. How am I going there, Jessica? All right, on time. Just a few more minutes and we can have questions.
Perfect.
So you were right. We have produced a letter and got a huge number of signatures from a lot of senior medical people in conjunction with Climate and Health Alliance, and that's been published and sent off to politicians. And this is just a few paragraphs that I've cut and pasted from that letter that was signed by hundreds and hundreds of doctors and professors and academics. So I'll let you read it. I don't believe in putting up slides and repeating what people can read much faster than I can speak. Nothing that's outside of what you already know. I guess we're just trying to say doctors really want to do something. It's not greenies, tree huggers, and ordinary people want to do something too. But we need to start factoring in the externalities that aren't factored in often, and shift the debate to a different debate. That there's risks, but then there's benefits. So that failure to mitigate and prepare is a risk, but then we've got an unparalleled opportunity to act and invest in a healthier and more prosperous future. So DEA, that's a very quick overview. DEA does lots of things, including visit politicians like your group. But we also write articles like this one in the Medical Journal of Australia, The Mining and Burning of Coal, Effects on the Health and Environment. Also, we're worried about coal seam gas expansion and the emissions from coal seam gas. Write quite a lot of submissions against developments, so focusing on the health impacts, talk to groups in the public, appear on Senate committees, because we do put those expert submissions in, trying to get the Clean Air Act tightened up to reduce the levels of some of the gases and particulates. So we're certainly active on a number of fronts, both with advocacy lobbying, but from the academic, we've written fact sheets on bushfire and smoke and heat, extreme heat impact on health and diet and health. A lot of things that I've touched on quickly. And so if you want any resources, feel free to go to our website, dea.org.au. I've also put up the Climate and Health Alliance website. We work with CAHA and do many things in conjunction. Their focus is more on climate and sustainable hospitals, whereas DA has a much broader focus and is just doctors. CAHA is a lot of health professionals, nurses, and many others. So it's more of an umbrella group. And we probably have a much tighter academic, rigorous scientific. We're not as reactive immediately to things happening in the media, because we want to make sure that we are seen as very scientific and that we're getting our facts right. So we have rigorous processes in any publications that they're checked and double checked.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our CCL channel by hitting the button in the top left-hand corner of this screen. Spread the word of CCL by using the share icon to as many of your contacts as possible. Thank you. See you next video.